Oh,
Eva, it's so
perfect.
good to have you on the Jewelry Business Academy podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Robin. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you as well. I've really been looking forward to having you on the show, and for you to share your story of building Inari jewelry. And this episode is extra special as you have been a part of the Jewelry Business Academy and community for a couple of months now. And I've been working in depth with you, so I really know you and your business really well. And I know that your story is really going to inspire a lot of jewelry business owners or people who are wanting to start their jewelry business. So before we dive in, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and just share a little bit more of your background and how you got to where you are
Mhm.
today?
Sounds good. Thanks, Robin. So, my name is Eva. I am the founder and maker behind Inari Jewelry, and I make fine jewelry that tells your story, whether it's through the gemstones that the customers chooses or the design behind the jewelry pieces. There are meaning behind each and every one of them. So, I started my business about 7 months ago, I think. So I left my corporate job. I was a management consultant before. I spent 8 years in that field, and I finally took the leap last year in May, to finally quit my job and start this business. So it's been an exciting 7 months. And yeah, I mean, 7 months seems like such a short period of time, but it felt like there's so much that has happened. I've learned so much from it. Yeah.
Mm, amazing. I love that. So I want to dive into that a little bit more because you were really on a really great career corporate path, climbing the corporate ladder really well, doing management consulting, and then you transitioned to a completely different world, a completely different pace of life. And I think you've
Mhm.
gone through a massive shift. So, what made you decide that you wanted to start your own jewelry business?
Good question. So I knew like I've always wanted to start a business. I didn't know what it was, but since young, I knew I wanted to run my own thing because I wanted to be in charge of my own life. I wanted to have that flexibility. And I've always loved solving problems. Post university, I felt like consulting was the right way to go because it just, provided me with the, learning curve to learn about
Mm,
business, be exposed. Also financially, it helps with the, just saving up money to be able to invest into a business. So I spent 8 years because it never really felt like the right time to
mhm,
fully dive into it. But in between my career as a consultant, I have actually started two jewelry businesses before, but always as a part-time gig rather than a full-time thing. So I've tried different businesses where, jewelry business where I followed the buy and sell model. And then I also did one where I partnered with my mom and she
mhm,
made the jewelry and I ran the business side of things. But I think after 8 years of, a career in consulting, I knew that if I stayed any longer, it would be really hard for me to leave the corporate job because I would have been in a seniority level where it would have been too hard to walk away, right?
mm,
So I thought to myself, I've had all the right milestones hit. And if I don't do it now, where I don't have a family, I don't have kids yet, it will be really hard to do it later on when I have family. So I thought, why not now? I'm
mm.
financially stable. I have enough money to invest into a business and do it right. I have enough experience in, advising other businesses on how they run the company to be able to put that knowledge to my own business. And I think in terms of just age wise timing, it just felt like, hey, let's give yourself 2 years, give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? You can always go back to your corporate job. So I felt like I've spent enough time building experience, making sure I have enough financially to sustain a business and also my lifestyle for the next X amount of years. Yeah, and it just felt right. So I knew
Mm,
like the timing was right. Now, in terms of why jewelry business, so I come up from a family of technically goldsmiths. My grandparents, my uncle, my aunts were all goldsmiths. So growing up, I will always spend time in the shop and I'll be picking out jewelry pieces that I love and I didn't like. um, And my mom also made beaded jewelry since I was young. So
Mm.
I guess I never really thought jewelry would be the way to go, but because I've been so exposed to it, um, I just always love pretty things. And I thought like, hey, I've seen how people do it. I've seen how they've done it traditionally. What about if I do that, but in a more modern way? Take it in a different manner, like build a brand out of it, build a design, well, create designs that I actually love, and hone values that I believe in within that brand. So that's why jewelry business, that's why now, and that's why Inari.
Oh, I love that. So that's a really powerful story, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to really resonate with that. So, I love that you took that really strategic approach to starting your business. You did
Mm-hmm.
give yourself 8 years in the financial world, in the consulting world, to build up,
Yeah.
a financial nest egg so that you can focus on this business for some time and really get it off the ground and get it up and running. And, I love that you've had those experiences of those different businesses, the buy and sell method, and then also working with your mom. I think that all adds up as well. And now you're fully in Inari Jewelry. I mean, you're the founder, you're the designer, you have staff working for you, you're building your team slowly, which is really, really incredible. So, for somebody who's going through a really similar journey to you, who is looking at leaving a really stable, really great corporate job that just isn't fulfilling to them long term, and that can feel really scary, that huge shift. Do you have one piece of advice
Mm.
that you wish somebody had told you or somebody did tell you back when you were making that decision?
Oh, wow. One is really hard, but I would say the one thing for me that like really pushed me to
Mm,
take that step forward is having a community around me and people around me that truly believed in me. Um, I feel like you will always have self-doubt, especially when you first start, because you feel like there's just so much to lose, right? What if I walk away from this job? Will I be able to climb the corporate ladder again? What if my peers are going to progress faster than I am? What about the financial stability, right? What if, this business doesn't work out and then you have to go back and you're so many years behind, for example? So there's a lot of, all of this what ifs playing in your mind. And for me, it was the hardest decision I've ever made, right? The
mm,
scariest, not the hottest. Well, it's hard and scary at the same time. I'm not going to deny that. But I was lucky enough to have parents who were super supportive. They knew that, I've worked really hard in consulting. They knew that I've always believed in wanting to start a business of my own. Um, and also my partner was super supportive. To be honest, he was the one who's like, why don't you do it? And what's there to lose? You can always go back. You can always go back. That's nothing that, you know, will set you back. Even if it doesn't
mm,
work out, you're going to go back with so much more experience that you might not be able to gain if you were to stay in your corporate job, right? So all of that really, that was like, I would say the one thing that pushed me forward to take the move that I did. Um, I mean, even the first 3 months after, going into Inari full time, there will be nights where I'm like, am I crazy? This is
mm,
crazy, like all this work, and it gets really scary. But throughout that period of time, just having a really supportive network, a really supportive group of people around you, really help push you forward up until the point where you have gained enough sort of like proof points to show you that this will work. I think like
mm,
that was after when I've launched and started seeing customer feedback and all. That was where I'm like, okay, I think this will work. But
mm,
imagine if I never had that push from like my family members who knew I wanted to do this all along, or my partner who knew I wanted to do this, but I was scared. I would have never known that, hey, this would work because I would have never gotten to a point where I could have collected customer feedback. So I'd say
mm.
one thing is surround yourself with people who support you. You don't need that many, you need one or two, but those are your go to who will always be there for you. Yeah.
That is such good advice. And I love that you have such a supportive community around you and that your family and your partner and your friends were so supportive of this because that's not always the case. And I think it's just really incredible that you had all that support. And I'm sure it definitely made the transition easier as well. You feel a little bit less like you have to prove yourself when you have people on your side as well, it just makes business feel easier and it just makes the transition easier, even though it's still scary, even though you still have moments of doubt. But I love that. And I'd love to touch, while we're talking about community, I'd love to touch on how coaching has supported you over the past few months, because you have been a part of my program, the Jewelry Business Academy, and we're still working together. And I'd love it if you could briefly share your experience of the program for anyone listening who's curious about the Jewelry Business Academy. So to start with, can you just share how you were feeling before we started working together? What made you realize that you were ready to be supported on your business building journey?
So, very good question. So when I started off, even though I had like really good support system, I felt like no one truly knew how to start a jewelry business because friends and family are supportive. They want the best out of you, but they've never started their own jewelry business of such a kind before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really hard to try and get advice from people who have never been in that situation before. And so where I find myself being in the first couple of months of business is that, I've always had these ideas or like concerns, but I never had someone I felt could really guide me and gave me a clear view of what was right from wrong. I'm not saying 100%, hey, this is a template, right, to succeed,
Mm-hmm.
but I felt like I knew the end destination, but the road that was really winding and foggy, and I wasn't sure if I was taking the right path. So it felt at times really lonely and a bit more confusing because I kind of knew like I had to do this, but I wasn't sure how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that, I could try and take a chance and do it in method A or B or C. So I find myself going in like cycles of like just trying to figure things out on my own. And I've got a lot of different advice from different people who ran different types of businesses, but my gut feel felt that it wasn't the same because it was such a different kind of business. So I knew I needed someone who have done this before, who have seen it done multiple times across different businesses. And at the same time, when I was feeling all of this, I felt alone because I came from, management consultant where you're always client facing and you have a huge team. And all of a sudden, I'm alone. I go to my studio and I work alone. I don't have meetings anymore and I'm alone. And all of these thoughts around what I should be doing, whether this is the right decision or not, is all sitting in my head. So I knew I needed to find one, someone who have done this before and someone who is experienced, and two, to form a community so that I'm not feeling like I'm the only one in this journey because it can feel really scary and really lonely. And that was where I started like listening to podcasts and I found yours.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
And now you're on
And
it.
that, yeah, it's crazy. Like less than 6 months ago, I was listening to your podcast and then now I'm on it. So really to me was having a bit more clarity and having guidance and coaching from someone who has done it before and someone who has seen it done multiple times. And also having a community so that it doesn't feel like you're on this journey alone because it can be very scary and very, very lonely.
I love that you've shared that so openly because I think a lot of people feel a lot of guilt for feeling, lonely when they wanted that peace and that headspace especially when they've transitioned from a corporate job where they were maybe feeling like, oh, I don't want to see people, I don't want to deal with this. And everyone's story is obviously different, but I know in my situation, I was like, get me out of here, please. And then you're suddenly on your own and entrepreneurship, and the first week is great. And then suddenly it's like, wow, you're alone a lot of the time unless you start building a team and you're making decisions on your own all the time. And, it just the weight of running a business can feel like a lot. it's just
Yeah.
it's challenging to go through life or business without people around you who understand what you're doing, who are there to bounce ideas off you, who are there to
Yeah.
guide you, who are there to give you that support. So I think a lot of people listening are going to really resonate with that because business can feel lonely. And so I thank you for sharing that. And what was your experience in the program? I know you're still in the program, of course, but how are you
Yeah.
feeling now? What shifts have you experienced like in your mindset and in your business over the past few months?
I remember our very first call where we talk about, what do I want to feel and after the first 90 days. And I remember very clearly I wanted to make sure that I feel like I've set the right foundation in order for me to grow as a business in the next, years, decade potentially. Um, and honestly, I think when I signed up for the Jewelry Business Academy, I wasn't expecting that much support and that much structure. And I think I've told you before as well, in terms of like how within the first week, within the first month, I was constantly going back to my partner. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I have invested in something that have like helped my business so much and helped me in my confidence level as well. And knowing what are the next steps to take. And you know how like I was talking about that foggy, windy road?
Mm,
It is now like a clearer path. And I know that I could take, path A or B. It's no longer foggy and windy. So I felt like through the Jewelry Business Academy, I have created discipline, structure, and also a lot more clarity in terms of where I should invest my time in. And I remember mentioning to you, right, my biggest fear was spending money and time in areas that were not going to be valuable to my business. And I feel like JBA is definitely has definitely provided me with clarity. So I know
mm,
now that if I put my effort in the right areas, I know I will see results. So
mm,
and also being in JBA means it creates accountability. When you work on your own, it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm just gonna take today easy. I'm just gonna lie in bed and work from here. I'm just gonna take it slow. But when you have someone else and a team to be accountable for, when everyone is doing a challenge, for example, when someone is joining that group call, when you are on the other end having weekly calls and checking in on me, it creates accountability. It creates that sense of push. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need that accountability just to get yourself going on days where you feel like I'd rather be in bed. And that helps tremendously. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I remember our first call together and you sending me a message, I think a few days later, just after just getting that structure set up in your business. And,
Yeah.
when you were talking about the accountability and getting that push, what came to mind was actually the call that we had just before the holidays. I don't know if you remember where you're like, oh, I haven't quite hit my goal, but I'm close, but that's fine. And I was like, well, let's
Yeah.
just like why don't we hit it? And I think you had 2 weeks
Yeah.
before the end of the year, and you're like, we can hit it. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, like let's go do these
Yeah.
two things and just do them today, do them tomorrow, and let's see if you can hit it. And do you want to just share briefly, as much as you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah. It's crazy. So it was 2 weeks before the new year, and like I mentioned, I was a little, well, I think it was quite a substantial amount away from hitting my goal.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, I went on holiday for 5 weeks and I was really busy for 2 months of the 6 months that I was running this business. So in my head, I was like, because I was scared of not hitting the goal, I started making excuses in my head. I'm like, oh, it's just this first 6 months. And I was away for 2 months out of that 6 months. It's okay if I didn't hit my goal. But then we were having this conversation and you were like, no, Eva, go hit it. And you were like,
mm,
why just follow up with these two opportunities that you had? And we were talking about the custom um opportunities that I had. And at that point I was like, oh, why would I, go out and pursue that? I was so fearful. But then after talking to you, I was just like, you know what? I should go chase my goals. And if I'm gonna be giving myself excuses, I'll never get there. And then one excuse will lead to another. And at the end of the day, I'm gonna be creating the same excuse for next year. So after our call, I was like, okay, I promised Robin I'll do this. And I remember taking that 2 days. I just wrote down that message and I was like, close my eyes, hit send. And I think it was actually on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve where I came back to you and I'm like, oh my God, Robin, I closed the deal. And
Yeah,
then
I
the next day
remember
I was
getting
like,
that
oh my
message.
God. Yeah. And then the next day I was like, oh my God, Robin, I closed another deal.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was saying yes to opportunities that were I was excited about. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have that conversation because I would have been too scared and I would have been making excuses in my head. And mind you, I'm not the kind of person who would make excuses all the time. I I'm always that kid in school who would finish her homework before she gets home. I'm always that consultant who would, be proactive and finish, give you 200% instead of just enough. So I'm
Hmm.
always that kind of person, but I realize when I'm in business, it doesn't translate that way because you always feel like you are validated by external approval. So I think that fear was keeping me from hitting my goals because I was always in my head. The imposter syndrome was real. But because I had you and I was like, I have to be accountable to Robin. I need to make sure that I do my part. It's not that scary as per
Hmm.
what you mentioned, right? So I went out there and I just did it. And it was crazy because I hit more than just my goal. I hit way more. And first half of January was super busy and I hit more than what I expected to hit in terms of revenue in January.
Oh,
And
incredible.
that gave me so much more confidence in just saying, if it scares you, just do it because what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no, it's okay. Um, but I think having that little bit of accountability, having someone you have to be accountable to, really is the nudge that you need to just get things started and just,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, accountability is
Thank you so much, Robin.
huge. Yeah, it's such a pleasure. I was so excited when I got that message. I remember one coming on Christmas Day and one a few days later. And I was like, wow, yeah, you definitely just went out and you took action. And, that's what happens in business is a lot of us experience imposter syndrome. And especially when you're in the early days, I mean, you're 7 months in now, or maybe not even quite 7 months in. And it's so natural to feel that imposter syndrome and to feel not good enough and to feel like hesitant to get no's, to put yourself out there. And
Yeah.
I always like to encourage people to reframe it. Collect the no's. I want to know by the end of 2023, how many times were you rejected? Like that's how we're going to
Mm-hmm.
keep moving forward. And the fact that you took action, that's the key. You waited a day, you took action, and that's how you start seeing results. And some people would have taken that information and been like, okay, I'm going to wait like a month or two and then take action and think about it. And that just delays everything. And now you've got yourself those wins, you're building that momentum. So it's just so incredible to see. I just absolutely love it. And what is actually coming to mind is, I know you're a really disciplined person. You came from a really disciplined industry where you worked really long hours. And then you came into entrepreneurship. And if you're open to it, are you open to sharing like your experience and how you've learned to sort of shift? I think it's something you're still working through. Shift your work,
Yeah.
your perspective on how many hours you're supposed to be working. Because I know, you know, people think when they come to the Jewelry Business Academy, I'm going to give them even more work than they're currently doing. And with some people, it's the opposite. With you, I was like, whoa, we need to cut back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting like because so I came from consulting where, I remember during COVID, it was like 8 a.m. meetings. Sometimes it was 7:30 a.m. meetings. So you wake up and you're in meetings nonstop. And I would miss out on lunch. I would miss out on breakfast. I would kind of like eat half my dinner and I'll still be at my desk and I have not moved for hours. And come 8 o'clock in the evening, I'm now starting to review work. And then I have to pick up my own work. So my full day would look like, an 8 a.m. start till sometimes 1 to 2 a.m. And that's like 5 days a week. Sometimes weekends you would have to work and half a Sunday you'll work. So I'm very used to hard work. I'm not scared of hard work. To me, that's
Mm,
normal.
mm,
So coming into business, I actually thought, oh, it was consulting that was the reason why I'm like that. And I realized it was actually not that. It was just a bad habit that I've built over the years because when I started my business, I realized that I was also working practically every waking hour because I had all these ideas that I wanted to work on weekends. I'm like, oh my God, what about this idea? What about that idea? Let's work on it. So I'm constantly just preferring to work rather than going out or like sleep.
mm.
So when we started working together and you were like, no, Eva, you need to have a cutoff before you burn out. And I'm like, oh, okay. I that was when I started like, okay, I need to actually have a clear line, like clear boundary. So that was where you taught me certain tricks where initially it felt really uncomfortable for me to do because it was in my natural habitat to like just let's whip up my laptop. Even if I'm not working, let's scroll through Instagram and make posts. I was always looking for something to do. But then I realized, like you were mentioning, right? If I'm not careful, I will burn out. And that was where I started realizing that, this is a long-term game. And if I don't make it sustainable, it's going to be really tiring. And all I know is business. And I think that was one point in time where I was just like constantly working. I didn't leave the house, and every single day felt the same. And I couldn't remember what day it was of the week, what time it was, because all I was doing was work.
Mm,
So after working together and drawing this clear boundaries, it got better.
mm,
I know that, the reason why I got into business was because I wanted to have flexibility. I wanted, even though I'm working on something I'm passionate about, I still needed that flexibility to prioritize myself. So that was where I'm like, do things like turn off notification, only answer and look into social media, twice a day, for example, because my instinct always was pick up my phone, answer that customer immediately, even if it's 12 a.m. I
mm.
tend to do that. And
Yeah,
now
I
I'm like, no,
remember.
I can wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
we were talking about going for yoga and
Yes.
actually shutting off, going for meditation, doing things for myself. And now I'm still working on it. I'm not perfect, but it feels so much more doable. Um, but I'm still working through that sense of guilt. Sometimes I still do get that little sense of guilt when I'm not working. But I know that, it's all a mindset thing and it takes time to shift that mindset because I've been trained to work like that for years.
Mm. Yeah, it's a major
I think,
shift. It's a major shift.
yeah,
And the key is not to feel guilty when you notice that you're feeling that way, that you feel like you should be working. But I think you're doing an amazing job. What you're doing is you're creating a life outside of your business. And that's so, so important. A lot of people make their business their full life. And that's really a
yeah,
recipe for burnout. It feels good at
yeah,
one stage and maybe for one season, but you need to have a life outside your business. And I think you're slowly really starting to embrace that. I think you already had a bit of a life, but it's just not feeling guilty when you're living your life, when you're seeing your
totally.
friends, when you're at yoga, not feeling guilty and not feeling like, oh, when I get back to work, I have to make up for the time that I was at
Yeah.
yoga and I have to make up. And I think we were chatting before we started recording. You've just had a few days of celebrations for the Chinese New Year, and it's like, no, well, now you can just take a few days off. You don't have to come back and feel like you have to make up for the days that you took off. And I think that mindset shift is really challenging, actually. It's a really difficult thing to shift after years in the corporate world. But I
Yeah.
love that you are committing to that, and that because it shifts how you build your business as well. It shifts
Yeah.
how sustainable it is.
Yeah, and I'm honestly, I was just thinking about this, right? And actually I reflect quite a bit, and I'm just thinking about how I'm so grateful because when we started working together, I knew I needed someone, but it wasn't clear to me that I needed a coach. But like looking back at that point in time, I was like, I'm so early in my business. Like, I would have never thought of getting a coach at such an early stage of my business because that was what, 2 months into my business full time.
Mm-hmm.
But like looking back, I'm just so grateful because I'm glad I have started early before I set the wrong foundation for my business. Because right now I'm setting good habits, good proper foundation so that I can just do better from here. Imagine having to like unpick all of this 5 years into business or 2 years into business or 1 year into business, because by then you've already made bad habits a habit in your business. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that, what we were talking about, drawing boundaries, making sure that I don't make my business my whole life, and getting rid of that, not getting rid, but learning how to deal with that guilt and not feel the guilt at such an early stage. It's just going to make me do better and focus my energy and emotions on things that matters.
A
So
hundred
yeah,
percent.
great.
Oh, well, I'm grateful that you joined the academy as well. It's been really incredible watching your growth as a business owner and how you've actually transitioned from hustle mode to really intentional strategic action in your business. And that's how you're
Yeah.
hitting your goals, you know? And it's so natural
Yeah.
to go into that hustle mode. And setting boundaries is actually harder than implementing strategies. I've seen it. No business owner struggles to implement strategies, but they do struggle with boundaries with themselves, with others. And so, really, I think it's incredible that you are getting that all in place right at the beginning of your business. I obviously work with so many business owners. I work with them at different levels, at different years in, and I have people who I've worked with 10 years in where we have to completely rebuild the foundations and rebuild the whole structure. And that's a lot more work than doing it right from the start. So I really love that you just getting that set up for success right from 2 months into your business. I think it's really incredible. And I'd love to just talk a little bit about, embracing being the face of your brand. Because I remember when you started, I think you were like, I don't want to be on video. I don't want to do this. Do you remember how you felt about being the face of your brand and showing up on video when we started working
Yeah.
together?
I remember that. I was like, we were talking about imposter syndrome, right? I was like
Mm.
major imposter syndrome. I was like, why would anybody buy jewelry from me? Who am I? Like, what if? So I was like tying every single ounce of my worth to my business and external validation. And I was like, why would people want to look at my face? It's so weird.
Mm.
Not that my face is weird, but like it's so weird that someone wants to see you. And I remember I was talking to you. This was after I came back from my trip, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And you were like, let's do this challenge where you post a video a day on like our internal Facebook group. And I was like, I remember after that call, I was like, okay, you've been scared of this all this while, but you can
Mm-hmm.
just do it. It's okay. Don't even do it on the Facebook group. Just do it to your community, because that's the people that are following you because they like your jewelry or they're interested in your brand in one way or another. And I remember just like recording, and I was just like, okay, close your eyes, just post it. And I realized after that, I had like people following me who came back and were like, oh my God, Eva, I love these videos. I love the behind the scene. I love how authentic you are. And sometimes people who I don't actually know in real life and friends I've made through Inari actually reply back and be like, hi, I think it's time for you to show your face. We're missing your face. And I was just like laughing. And I love how my community has been like, oh my God, I love talking to you. Because even though you're not really like in person, I felt like I knew you, I know you. So it was really nice. I mean, it feels awkward for the first couple of times, but I think now I don't do it as often as I should. And that's one of my goals that I want to hit. But I now try and like video myself one time.
Mm-hmm.
maximum twice. And I try to do videos with voiceover in it because, like you mentioned, right, you're building a community, and the first couple of times doing it is hardest. But then after that, when you start hearing people's feedback and when your community come out and like meet you at events, and when they chat to you on a daily basis about what plants you should have in your studio, you know that, hey, it's not that bad. And in fact, you've made so many friends. So
Mm.
that mindset shift that you've given me, or like you've, sort of like directed me into, have actually helped me so much in my business because honestly, you know, I feel the most fulfilled when I'm doing things that people can relate to, and I'm part of people's stories. My jewelry are part of people's stories. And by showing my face, people are more willing to share with me how my jewelry is impacting their lives. So it's such a win-win situation, and I'm able to hone like really good long-term relationship with my customers. Who
Mm.
actually today I would call some of them my friends. I've even went on coffee dates with some of them before, which is crazy because like how would, a customer on Instagram become your friend that you go for coffee with?
I
So
love
it
that
has
so
changed my
much. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
I love that, Eva. And yeah, I remember when you were just like, okay, I'm just gonna go right for it. I'm gonna post this video straight to my Instagram. And getting that response and getting that feedback, every client that I've done this with always gets that
Yeah.
feedback from their community. They're like, wow, I didn't even know you look like this, or it's so good to see you and feel connected to you. And when you consistently start showing up as yourself, you don't have to be anyone else, just show up as you are, share what you're doing. It builds that know, like, trust factor, and it makes you feel more connected to your community and they feel more connected to you. It's like a win-win situation. It's good for your
Yeah.
emotional well-being and your mental health to
Yeah.
feel a part of another community that you're building. It's good for your
Yeah.
business. That's going to drive sales as well. So it's just a win-win-win situation. And I love that you just dived in and embraced it, even though it was uncomfortable, even though, you had that fear of like, who am I to be doing this? You just took action, you dived in. And as you said, like a couple of times after posting, you look really comfortable. And now it's easy. Now it's like,
Thanks.
okay, just just go
Turn
just
it
go for
on.
it. Yeah, just turn it on, do one take, maximum two. We have a two take rule
Yeah.
actually in the Jewelry Business Academy. Nobody can retake
Yeah.
more than twice, and then it gets posted. Easy, straightforward.
Yeah.
So I really love that. um
Yeah.
so what would you say when you're looking back on your 7 months journey of entrepreneurship? What would you say is like one of the biggest lessons you've learned that maybe
Oh,
like you could go back, if you could go back to yourself in month one of your business and give yourself one piece
yeah.
of advice that you've learned since then, what would that be?
Uh, that the fear will never go away. And the only, I wouldn't say cure, like the only solution in, sort of like getting over the fear is actually taking action.
Mm,
And honestly, I feel like that has remained the same throughout the 7 months that I've been in business, which I know it's like a very short period of time compared to what other people might have been in business for, right? But I realized that the fear never goes away. And the only difference between, the fear and the result is actually taking action. And a lot of that comes from having someone to be accountable to us and, being able to just like do it.
mm,
Um, to me, that baby steps have given me, looking back, I'm like, wow, it's only been 7 months, but I've achieved quite a bit of stuff in my own tiny little realm, right? I feel like I've achieved quite a bit. And that was all because there were little steps that you were telling me, just do that, just take these little steps. And whilst it might be scary, it might not feel like a big deal, it compounds over time. And
mm,
I think the only way that I felt like I was truly comfortable with where I am is by just, combating that fear by taking action. So I'd say that yeah, that was one thing that if I realized back then, maybe I wouldn't have given myself excuses and I would have just done it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's incredibly powerful, actually, to recognize that there's always fear. I feel it as well, as a business owner, not so much anymore because I've been in entrepreneurship for so many years, but
yeah,
notice the fear and then do it anyway, as long as it's not something that's going to put your life at risk, which most of the time it's not. It's just like, okay, I feel
yeah,
scared, I feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to take action either way. And
yeah,
recognizing that, building a successful business is simply an accumulation of lots of teeny tiny doable steps. And I say this all the
yeah,
time. It's like basically an accumulation of 2-minute tasks that absolutely anyone can do, you know, but it's being
mm,
consistent with that and it's actually taking action and doing them. That's the key. That's
yeah,
the key to having that compounding success, to building momentum in your business and just taking action, whether you're feeling scared or not. It's recognizing, okay, I'm uncomfortable, I'm
100%.
scared, but I'm just going to do this, take action anyway, because I know
Yeah,
this is the direction I need
100.
to be going in. So what advice would
Yeah.
you have for someone who's listening to this and knows that they need more clarity and focus and structure and accountability in moving their business forward, but they're feeling really
Mhm.
anxious about making the investment in themselves and their business?
Mm. I wanted to say definitely get a coach. Why? Because I mean, like I've always had coaching, but never to this extent. And I've mentioned this to you before, right? I was just like back then I didn't know all that I've known today after getting coaching. But my logic back then was, hey, if I'm gonna invest into something that could one, save me time, two, save me money, and three, probably grow my business and set the right foundation for me to be able to grow and make more money in the future, it's a worthwhile investment. I have a friend who always reminds me, especially in the early days of business, you have to spend money to make money.
Mm,
And until today, whenever I'm scared of like making that investment, I remind myself, if I don't spend the money to either purchase materials or to get, coaching or to do something for my business, you will always remain at that scale, right? Because you're too worried to take that step forward. And at the end of the day, it's about calculated risk and also calculated investment, right? If you're gonna get your ROI, is gonna be much more than what you're putting in 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, do it. Because
mm,
you're you're thinking really short term if you're like, oh, I don't want to spend that money to get coaching, or I don't want to spend that money to buy materials, or I don't want to spend money doing something, right? But if you don't spend that money now, you might not be able to grow to the extent that you might have with that money spent. So I always think about, what am I spending on? Is this going to help me grow my business? How much value it's going to bring? And if it is, then it's a worthwhile investment. And to
mm.
me, coaching is a worthwhile investment because it's the knowledge, the confidence, and the clarity that you get, especially early in business, to be able to take actions and to also be able to like avoid wasting your money on other areas that you don't actually need to be spending money on and wasting your time because time is precious. So for me, I'm like super grateful that I've had coaching and I'm still getting coaching and
Yeah.
having a community because to me,
Mm.
I have so much more clarity and so much more confidence compared to when I first started.
I love that. And, I love that advice to, look at what the return on your investment will be 6 months from now, 1 year from now.
Yeah.
And for me, my experience, I didn't unfortunately have coaches back when I started my jewelry business, but as a coach, I heavily invest in coaches now, and I've seen the
Mm,
difference in starting a business from scratch with no coaching and then starting a different business with that support. It collapses time. You're
yeah.
learning from your coaches what they've done, what not to do, and there's a lot of what not to do that is really incredibly powerful in moving your business
Mm,
forward and saving you time, energy, and money. And for me, time is the one resource we never get back. Everything else you
agreed.
can get back. So as uncomfortable as it is sometimes investing in yourself, investing in your business, I've always found that if I can save time, I'm willing to do that. And I've just seen two sides of it, and
Yeah.
it's incredible how much easier and how much more supported I feel on my journey as well. So I'd love to know, what is one of the highlights of your entrepreneurial journey in the last 7 months?
Oh, a highlight. Um, so hard to make it this far and feel that, wow, I'm still in it after 7 months and I haven't run back to my corporate job.
Yeah.
um, not only that, I think like it's so hard. Like I don't want to count like there's so many different small milestones that I celebrated, but I feel like the biggest highlight is where I am today and being able to look back and be like, wow, I actually see potential in what I'm doing. And I actually think this can be a career. And that was
Mm,
what, we were chatting about in the very first, um, call that we had. You were like, what do you want to get out of this in the first 90 days? Right. Um, and I've gotten that. I wanted that clarity and I wanted that confidence that this could be a career that I build for myself for the long term. And I think that's the highlight that I have now. It's not like a moment where you just go like, bam, yes. I feel like this is something that could work. It is an accumulation of all the little milestones that has happened in the past 7 months, to have given me that not a moment, but that clarity and that highlight to say that, hey, actually, I think, this can work. And I
mm,
think this could be something that I turn into a career in the long term. I
I
don't know if
love
that's
that.
answering your question because it's not a milestone per se.
No,
Yeah.
that answers the question. I think that's actually really powerful because you're looking at all the proof that your concept works, all the evidence
Yeah.
that you've collected over 7 months, all the customers, the repeat customers, going past your sales goals. All those little things are like, wow, okay, this is proof that my concept is working, that I'm on track, that this is a legitimate business
Mm-hmm.
that can sustain me for my career. This can be my full-time thing. I don't have to go back to the corporate world. So I think that's really powerful. And I don't know if you did share the details about your brand, but can you just, for anyone who's listening, who's like, okay, well, you're 7 months in, you obviously are doing really, really well so far in your business. You've really, even though you took 5 weeks vacation in your first 7 months, I think you're doing incredibly well. You've built a really good customer base. But can you share a little bit more about the type of jewelry that you make, and just share a little bit more about Inari jewelry?
So Inari jewelry, or the name Inari actually is the Japanese word for prosperity. And I wanted the brand to represent successful females out there. And the reason why I wanted to my brand to resemble that was because growing up, I've always had this image in my mind where, success looks like this, which is climb the corporate ladder, make CEO or make partner. And that is what success looks like. But after, so many years of like exploring different parts of the world and living in different parts of the world, you see successes. You see females that are successful in different forms. So I wanted a brand that represents successful female out there and that could look like anything. You could be an interior designer and be successful. You can be, I don't know, a singer and be successful, right? You can be an artist and be successful. So I wanted to create a brand that empowers females. So all of my jewelry are at the moment very dainty. It has gemstones. It uses semi-precious stones, and I work with 14K gold fill and sterling silver. And each of these pieces, there's a story behind it. So in my second collection, it's called the Rise, which is a selection of rings. And all the different rings were, I guess, different sort of like ideology, I would say, or like reminders, like daily reminders for females. So I have an ebb and flow ring that basically serves as a reminder to females who are wearing it, or males even, that, sometimes life comes in ups and downs. And that ring, when you're wearing it, reminds you that, this too shall pass, for example.
Mm.
I've got an earring that I call it on the rise climber, which when you wear it, you're like, hey, this is a reminder that, I'm on the rise in my life and in my career and whatever I'm doing. So I wanted jewelry pieces that were not only a pretty little thing to look at, but something that was meaningful. Because when you wear it and you see it on yourself, it serves as a daily reminder. But when you gift it to other people, it also becomes like a meaningful gift. You don't want to just, walk into a shop and buy the first thing you see because it's affordable and you give it to someone else just to know that, it doesn't last 3 wears. And it
Mm.
was just because you needed to find a gift for someone. So I wanted I wanted to create a brand where my jewelry actually has meaning, whether it's in the design or in the gemstones that we're using, because then not only is it purposeful, you're not just wearing it so that you look good, but also to feel good and for other people to feel good.
I love that. You've built such a beautiful, beautiful brand. And we're going to link
Thank you.
all that. We'll link all those so people can go take a look. But I just love how meaningful all of your pieces are and how there's such a strong story behind them. So I love that. And we will link your Instagram and stuff in 2 minutes, but I do have a question for you. Is there one book that you recommend all business owners listening to this read if they could only read one? Is there one that's really impacted you on your journey?
Okay. Funny enough, I actually have a book in front of me, which I really love. I'll
Amazing.
pick it up. I was just reading it earlier. It's called In the Company of Women by Grace Bonnie.
Mhm.
I actually have it on my dining table all the time. But I picked this up when I was actually traveling, and I absolutely love it. It's basically an inspirational book with 100 plus different profiles of makers, artists, entrepreneurs, people who are really females, who are really successful in whatever businesses they're doing and advice they were giving. And I just found it so helpful because remember how I was mentioning in the beginning of my journey, I felt really lonely. I felt like nobody was really in the same sort of like shoes that I was in, especially in my community. So it's really hard to fully um for someone to fully understand what you're going through. So this book has helped tremendously because I feel like I've got a community in this book and there are other people who have done it before and they've done it successfully and they've made an incredible life out of their passion. And I can
Mm.
too. And it's not a heavy book where you sit down and read every single page, right? It's one where it's different profiles. So whenever I need a pick me up or a little nudge or a little boost, I'll go to the book and I'm like, okay, let's read about this maker. Oh wow, this person has achieved incredible things. So highly, highly recommend the book.
Mm, I love that. I'm
Yeah.
going to add that to my reading list. Thank you. And I'm going to link it in the show notes for anyone listening who wants to pick that up too. But it sounds like an incredibly powerful book, a really great book for female entrepreneurs who are, whether you're just starting out or a couple of years into your journey. So thank you for sharing, Eva. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your story of starting Inari Jewelry and your experience of building it 7 months in. I think it's really powerful to have different viewpoints because I often have people who are a couple of years into their business. And, the reality is a lot of people, a lot of listeners are also where you are, or they're just starting, or they're thinking of
Mhm.
starting. And so hearing from you, hearing your story, hearing your experience, I know it's going to have helped a lot of listeners. And so for anyone who's listening to this and is feeling really, really inspired by you and what you're doing and wants to follow along on your journey and take a look at your jewelry, where can they connect with you? Where can they find you? And how can our listeners support you?
So you can find me on Instagram at inarijewelry.com. Sorry, Inari Jewelry. And the jewelry is spelled slightly differently from how you spell it in Canada, I think. So it's Jewellery. And I've also got my own website, which is www.inarijewelry.com. Or I just started on TikTok because of our TikTok challenge. So you can also find me
Yes.
there for more real behind the scenes sort of videos.
Amazing. Thank you. So I'm going to link those all in the show notes. So anyone listening, you can just click on the show notes, whether you're listening on Apple or podcasts or Spotify, and you'll be able to click on the links and go directly there. But Eva, it's been so wonderful chatting to you. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll have to bring you on in a couple of months to see like what the progress has been.
I love how you created accountability there, Robin.
Yeah.
Now I have to do so much more.
Yeah, everyone's listening. They
I
want to
love
know where
that.
you are 7 months from today. So we
I
better keep
have to make sure I
moving.
progress so much more.
You have to keep moving, keep taking those little steps every day.
Exactly. You can't slack. No, I'm kidding. No, but it's been a great pleasure. I absolutely love chatting with you, Robin, and with your community. And like I said, it's crazy to think that 6 months ago I found you on, on I think Spotify, and now I'm on it. And who knows where it
Yeah.
will be 1 year from
Oh
now.
yeah, I
So
think
thank
you're
you so much
definitely
for having
gonna
me.
you're on to big things and your business is ready, you've built a really special, really incredible business and it's got that structure and strategy behind it. So I think I'm excited to look back with you 1 year from today and we'll do another podcast and we'll see what you've achieved since this last chat. But thank you again
And it's
so
all
much
thanks to
for
you, Robin.
amazing. Thanks so much, Eva.